Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This beautiful Thursday, I just had my night green tea. It's 10 p.m. my time here in Dubai. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you are having a great day, great afternoon, interesting evening, and I hope you will benefit from tonight's webinar. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a very, very, very important topic. We're going to be talking about fear. And today I'm focusing on three different types of fears. We're going to be talking about the fear of failure. We're going to be talking about the fear of judgment. And we're going to be talking about the fear of rejection. Now, we're going to be doing this for almost 1 hour. So I want you to stay till the end, because at the end of the webinar, I have a special invitation for you. Now, thank God, this week, I think I managed to, yes, I did. I managed to make the chat work. So you can talk to me, you can send me your comments, and I'll be asking you some questions along the way. So please share your feedback. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have any questions also, please ask them. I'll try to answer them at the end of the webinar. And also maybe if not, I might be using those questions to create even different and new webinars. So for tonight, the reason it's interesting because I've been having chats with people and I've been talking with people over the phone or over Zoom, and I've been noticing a lot of fear going on. And fear is not something that we should be afraid of. Fear is something that we want to learn how to embrace, and we want to learn how to learn from fear. So today, that's why I wanted to talk about this topic, and that's why I wanted to focus on this topic. And it's part of the things that I work with. It's part of the stuff that I support people with. So that's why I decided today to talk about fear. Now, you might think, with me going online all the time and talking to people and, being all active and fun and maybe funny, you might think that, oh my God, this woman has like no fear. She is fearless. I only wish, my friends, I only wish. Fear is something that we all have. And before I started this journey of mine, I realized that, later on, I realized that I was really very, very much living in the fear of failure. I was always worried. I was always that person who would not risk anything and not venture into anything because I was afraid that I might fail. So my fear of failure was a huge part, like it took a huge part of my life until I started my own realization and my own inward journey and my own work on myself. Only then I realized that, oh my God, I have this fear, and I worked on releasing this fear, and I worked so hard. And I tell you, one of the major manifestations of the fear of failure is actually procrastination. And for those who know the work that I do, and for those who have spoken to me about it, you would know that this is the major theme and major part about the work that I do, because that's what I want to help people get over, that procrastination. And procrastination is one of the major manifestations of the fear of failure. I remember every time I wanted to do something big, every time I wanted to become that successful person, I would always find something to stop me. I would always find the next better idea. I would always find the problem with the current idea because I was afraid. I was afraid to move forward. I was afraid to make mistakes. I was afraid, and fear, that fear of failure that I had was leading me to have other types of fears, like fear of judgment and like fear of being rejected, which are the two other types of fear that I'm going to be focusing on today. So the reason why I chose these three fears is because they interconnect a lot, and they sort of come together, you know, they're like, and they build on each other. So when I was so afraid to fail, what I was doing, I was always finding problems with the things that I wanted to do. I was always finding that, you know, trigger that's gonna push me to stop, that trigger that's gonna tell me, hey, don't do that. Something bad is going to happen, or you're gonna fail big time, or you're gonna be the laughter of, like, the laughing stock of the world, you know? These were the feelings that I used to have before I started my own self-discovery journey and my own self-development journey. And when I did that, the aha moments that I was having every time I was figuring something out and realizing, like, oh my God, so this is what I was doing. Oh my God, now I understand. You know, if you are going through something like this, something similar, if you feel like you put, you know, you start putting some what do you call them, like blocks in your own way, tell me in the chat. I'd like to know. I'd like to know if this is something that you are going through right now in your life. And if you feel like, you know, all the eyes are on you. This is what happens when we are afraid of failing. This is what happens when we are afraid of being judged. And this is what happens also when we are afraid of being rejected. We feel like we are the center of the world, and everyone, like, we are under the microscope. Like, everyone is just looking at us. Like, there's this, I don't like to use the conspiracy theory stuff, but it feels like this. It feels like everyone is out to get me. And that fear becomes so big to the point that it becomes something that might trigger anxiety attacks. It might trigger depression. It might trigger sometimes even suicidal thoughts, especially if we are in a very, very bad depression or depressive state. So working around fear and realizing what sorts of fear we are facing and what sorts of fear we have is a very, very critical thing when we are going through our own self-discovery journey and our own self-development journey. It's one of the main limiting beliefs that we have. And when we start our self-development journey, the first thing that we want to do is we want to understand what are our limitations, what are our limiting beliefs, and where do they come from, and who instilled those beliefs in us, and why do we have them? So these are the big questions that we start asking ourselves when we start on our journey to understand really what are the limitations and why we have them. And then we want to also figure out how to get rid of those limitations and how to overcome them and how to really replace them with programs and with information that is now serving us rather than limiting us. So once we start doing that, and once we work on our limiting beliefs, if we are facing problems today, tomorrow is going to be way much brighter when we start working on ourselves. And the beauty of doing this is the minute we start, it becomes like I always compare it to, and those of you who have seen my webinars before, you would remember this, but I always compare this self-discovery journey to the Pringles ad. I don't know if you know it, but one of the Pringles ads, their motto is when you pop, you don't stop. So basically what happens when you start your personal development journey, this is exactly what happens. You start working on yourself. And because when you start working on yourself, you start changing and you start seeing results and you start moving literally step by step, gradually to the best place where you really want to be, that amazing place that you envision yourself at. That journey keeps on moving forward and forward, because now you see the results. Now you see where you could go. And that's why it's very important to get over your limitations. And in this case, we're talking about fear. So the first fear that I want to focus on is the fear of failure. Now, why? How does this fear develop? A lot of the limitations, I always say it, I'm going to say it over and over again, because repetition is the mother of all skills. So the more you hear it, the more you will remember it. All our limitations, they either start with us when we are kids, or we inherit them literally in our DNA from our ancestors, or from different timelines. For those of you who really are in that world and know that that world exists, right? So a lot of our limitations have happened to us since forever, and we've been living with them for years and years. And those of us who realize that we have limitations and who know or realize that we can get over those limitations are very lucky, because we are no longer just going with the flow of life. We are no longer sheep in the herd, you know. We are now masters of our own life. We are now so knowledgeable that we know that we can take the step to become the boss of us. And the boss of us means the boss of our life, means the boss of everything that happens for us in our life. So going back to those fears, they either developed with us as children because we've been in very specific situations as children, or we've inherited them from our ancestors who in their turn have been in very specific situations that asked them to develop those fears or limitations. So this applies to all limitations, not only to fear, but today we're focusing on fear. So one of the major causes of being afraid to fail is setting up high expectations for ourselves. So when we are planning our life and when we are putting this beautiful, vision for ourselves in writing, or sometimes not even in writing, we think about it, right? When we start hiring the expectations, this is when fear starts kicking in. Because the higher the expectations, the more work we need to do. And then that more work means that we need to think a lot, we need to do a lot, we need to come up with new stuff. And that causes a lot of overwhelm. And that overwhelm translates in fear. So the first thing that might cause us to be afraid to fail is setting up those high expectations. Like if I put an expectations to become, I don't know, a billionaire, such a high expectation for me to reach right now, right? So when I do that, I am setting myself to fail. So I don't know, but I feel like I'm going to talk about the causes and the solutions at the same time, because they kind of work together. So the solution to this is, instead of putting yourself in a place where you set yourself to very high expectations, maybe lower your expectations and go step by step. There's nothing wrong with you dividing your plan in a way where it actually can work. So instead of going straight away to that big, huge expectation, then when you look at it, you become already very overwhelmed and you start having that fear. Oh my God, I'm definitely going to fail, because these are the thoughts that we tell ourselves, right? Tell me in the chat, isn't this what you think when you are setting, when you have like a big goal in front of you, you put yourself in a place where you want to achieve something huge, and then you start telling yourself that, oh my God, this is too big, I can't do this, I'm definitely going to fail, I don't have the power, I don't have the means, I don't have, I don't know the finances, I don't have the know-how, you start telling yourself these stories and these thoughts. And by the way, no one is telling you this. You're the one talking to yourself. You're the one putting those thoughts in your brain. And those thoughts are going to have the result. And that result is basically you're going to be afraid to fail, right? So listen to what kind of thoughts that you are saying to yourself when you are setting those big and high expectations. That's one of the things, that's one of the ways where like fear manifests, or this is how one of the causes of fear, that setting high expectations for ourselves. A second cause for being afraid to fail is basically your past experiences. So sometimes we go through experiences in life where we fail. And by the way, failure is a normal thing to happen. We are, after all, human beings. And when we fail, we want to look at failure as a kind of teaching opportunity. It's our opportunity to learn. It's our opportunity to understand how things work. For example, it's our opportunity to understand how the world runs, how people, feel, or how people go about doing things for their lives. So if we fail, the first thing I want you to remember is to be compassionate with yourself, to accept this and learn from it. Take it as a learning experience. Take it as your way to understand yourself better, your way to understand the world better, to understand others better. Okay? So learn from your past experiences instead of being afraid of them. So if you have failed in the past, here's what you can do. You can sit with that experience and go through it and ask yourself, what happened here? Why did I fail here? What were the expectations that I set for myself, right? Remember the high expectations? Why was I so worried, for example? Or why wasn't I able to follow through with my plan? So instead of being afraid from your past experiences of failure, use them as your learning technique. Use them as your, I don't know, like create a journal just for these things and go back to it all the time and remind yourself what happened and create solutions, because you are able to do all of this. You have all the power. All you need to do is tap into it. Sometimes we think that we are powerless. Sometimes we think that the circumstances are way above us. It's true that sometimes we are faced with circumstances that are beyond our control. But you know what is in our control? Our reaction to those circumstances, how we react to anything is not imposed on us. It is our choice. It is our call how we react to things around us. So instead of reacting to my failure past experiences by being more afraid to fail, I want to react to them by learning from them, right? So the cause of being afraid could be a past experience that we've been through. And it's also, that cause can actually be our solution, as in understanding what happened and learning from what happened and moving past it and creating something different, creating something new, right? So let me know if you feel that this, like, does this resonate with you? Does it make sense? For me, it makes a lot of sense. And you know what? It's amazing. When I started my journey, I realized that because I work with the mind and I work with the subconscious mind and I work with all the limitations and all the beliefs that we create for ourselves, I sort of realized, especially because I work with the mind, I sort of realized how much everything that when we start talking to ourselves in a clear way, how much things start making sense, you know? And the more we dive deep into our potential, we start realizing that everything is, you know, logical. If we really think about it, and if we start writing things down, it will look literally like 1 + 1 = 2. Oh, of course, 1 + 1 = 2. That's so true. But because when we go through life without taking a breath, we are always caught up with life. We are always like, it happens to us instead of us deciding what happens in our life. Those of you who are watching this today, and those of you who are going to be watching the replay as well, you are people who have stopped. You are people who have stopped and asked the question, like, is this it? Is this going to be my life? Really? Is this what I signed up for? Is this why I came here? Because you stopped and asked yourself the questions, those big questions are what is leading you today to better yourself, to figure out what are the things that you still have hidden within you that have not shown yet, and you want to know what they are, because believe me, they are gems. They are gems that are hiding, and we want to go inside and figure them out and find them and work with them, you know? So that's the second cause of being afraid to fail, and that cause is at the same time a solution, right? Now, the third cause of being afraid to fail is actually another fear, which is the fear of judgment that we're going to be talking about as well. So when we are afraid of being judged, we are afraid to fail, because all that we are thinking of is, what are people going to say about me? And this is where that imposter syndrome starts kicking in, where we think that we don't have the power, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the capacity to do things, where if we actually take a breath and stop and ask ourselves, we can find the way. And we always do. Those who stop and ask themselves the questions, believe me, they always find the answers. The answers will always come. We just want to make sure that we stop and ask. Okay? So that fear of judgment is also it's one of the major causes why we are afraid to fail, because what will others say about us? So to avoid that, we don't do anything, right? Another cause for being afraid to fail, or for the fear of failure to manifest, is being a perfectionist. Now, when you are a perfectionist, you want to make sure everything is perfect. And because you want to make sure everything is perfect, you are always afraid that you're going to fail. You're always afraid that something's going to go wrong. You're always afraid that something's not going to be exactly where it needs to be. So that fear, that perfectionism, you know, wanting everything to be on the dot, everything to be right. And we know that perfection is, well, it's not impossible, you know, but it's also a hindering process. The more we want to be perfect, the longer things will take for us to do. And this is one of the major reasons why people procrastinate. Procrastination is, by the way, one of the biggest manifestations of being afraid to fail is when you start procrastinating. When you start procrastinating and when you become more and more perfectionist, this is you being afraid to fail. As simple as that. It is you being afraid to fail, and it could also be you being afraid to succeed. Now, I'm not talking about the fear of success today, but the fear of success is very real. It exists. And a lot of people do not move forward in their life because they are afraid to succeed. Why? Because success comes with a lot of responsibility. And that's why a lot of people, instead of being afraid to fail, they are afraid to succeed because they feel like, oh my God, if I succeed, that means I'm going to be responsible to do this and that and this and that and this. And they make it like a huge story in their head and they stop themselves. And the same thing applies to being afraid of failure. And another reason why we are afraid to fail is because part of us, or a trait that we might be having, is that low self-esteem. We do not trust who we truly are. We do not believe in our own self. You know, we look at our own selves and we look down at us. You know, instead of having someone look down on you, you are already doing that for yourself, against yourself, actually, right? So that low self-esteem is a major cause for us to be afraid to fail. I don't have what it takes. I'm not good enough. And that I'm not good enough is one of the major, very, like the most common limiting belief out there is I am not good enough. And if you resonate with that, let me know. If you've ever felt that, you know, this is something that you go through or that you feel ever in your life, like I'm not good enough, let me know in the comments or in the chat here. For those of you who are watching the replay, let me know in the comments or even send me a message. Tell me, oh yeah, Maysoon, I resonate a lot with that. I know exactly what you mean. You know, so these are the 5 major causes for failure. Okay. Now, like I said, how fear of failure manifests, number 1 is by us becoming procrastinators. I was the queen of procrastination, I tell you. I was the queen of, and I still do it sometimes because, again, I am only human, you know, and I am just a normal person. Sometimes I will fall, and the point is that if I fall, I want to be able to stand back up. I want to have the tools to stand back up. And I do have the tools to stand back up. This is everything that I'm doing today is about this, you know, but sometimes I still fall, and that's only natural. That's only human. And I'm glad that I can talk about myself and say that, you know, I'm only human, you know. So procrastination is, if you procrastinate, maybe you want to ask yourself, what is it that I'm afraid to fail at? You know, if you are a perfectionist, for sure, and perfectionism is also another way for procrastination to manifest itself, because when we procrastinate, most of the time we try to find the things, you know, we look for perfection in everything. We want everything to be perfect, and that's what leads us to putting things off. Okay, I'll do it later because it still needs to be done this way. It still needs this. It still needs that. It still needs this and that. And then we end up not doing anything, right? So remember, procrastination, perfectionism, they come together, and both of them are a manifestation of being afraid to fail, right? The third thing is, when we are afraid to fail, what happens is we start avoiding taking risks. We start avoiding being in situations where we might fail. You know, any situation that might lead us to fail, we start avoiding it. So these are the manifestations. So if you are someone who is like facing some decision-making process and you start avoiding that and you want to go in a different direction, know that there's a fear of failure lying there somewhere. So if you are someone who is going through that, also let me know in the chat. And also, we start self-sabotaging ourselves. And that's also another way of procrastinating, by the way, when you start self-sabotaging yourself. This is something that I found out about myself years ago. And I was so surprised because I'm not that person who wants to, you know, self-sabotage, but I realized later that I was doing that because I was procrastinating, because I was afraid to fail. So it's all interconnected. Now, what we want to do to be able to get over that fear. Number one, I said already, lower those expectations. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have high expectations. Have high expectations, but kind of bring them to your knowledge or bring them to existence step by step. You know, put realistic goals for yourselves. Don't put those goals that are going to be inachievable, or that you know that right now you don't have the means to achieve them. So don't put those goals. Put the goals that you know you can achieve at this very specific moment, okay? Then recognize that you have that belief. Recognize that you are afraid to fail. When I always say awareness is 50% of the problem solved. So the minute we are aware, we start looking at that place and we start trying to fix things from that place. So always remember that you want to recognize that you have that fear and that it's there. And then what you want to do is, instead of acknowledging it and just living with it as a failure, reframe it, learn from it, you know, look at failure and see what are the things that this failure that you've been through, what are the things that you have learned from that? And look at the learnings. So reframe that experience instead of putting yourself in that experience and always being afraid and always being stuck. Look at it from a different perspective. I always say this, and lately it's becoming very common because every time I'm talking to someone, I'm always saying to them, change the story, because you're the owner of the story. You're the one telling the story. So what you want to do is you want to really change the story that you are telling. And that story is the story of your life. So change the story. Change how you are telling it and change it completely, because it's in your hands. You are the one who is writing that book. So how you choose to write the book is your choice. It's not mine. It's not your parents. It's not the society. It's your choice. So what do you want to do with that choice that you have, that you are given? It's your God gift to you. It's God's gift to you, that you have that choice, how you want to move, how you want to do your, how you want to live your life. Okay, so be conscious of that. Always remember that. And that's when you do that, this is when you cultivate a growth mindset. And when you cultivate a growth mindset, if you are in a growth mindset, fear cannot be anywhere close to you, you know, because you already know that you are going there. You already know that you will be that person that you dream of, that you desire to be. Okay, so that mindset, growth mindset, is very important as well. And like I said, when you are aware, that's 50% of this problem solved. And when you go in your growth, that's the other 50%, right? That's the 50% passage where you want to be, growing your mindset, okay? And then when you want, instead of avoiding risks, because that's one of the things how fear of failure manifests itself, instead of avoiding risks, you want to take calculated risks, small risks, calculated risks, okay? And then always remember that you are human, that it's okay to make mistakes. In fact, it's good to make mistakes, because how else are you going to learn? If we don't make mistakes, we won't learn. We want to make mistakes. It's one of the things that we want to actually do and have in our life. So make your mistakes and learn from them. And I like, being aware. Like, I'm not someone who writes a lot, but I always talk to myself. I always speak, like my brain does not stop talking. So if you are someone who likes writing, do this in writing, and write down the mistakes that you go through. Write down your failures. Write down what you learned, like I said initially. And if really, like, there's no other way for you, well, not necessarily there's no other way. It's always important to seek support. It's always important. And I will mention this in all three failures, in all three fears. Seeking support is one of the major things that you want to do when you are going through something like this in your life, when you are facing your limitations, when you are, trying to develop yourself. Seeking support, there's no shame in it. On the contrary, it's actually very mindful of you, and it shows that you are really aware of what you're doing. When you seek support from family members. You ask for help from your friends. You ask for professional help if you need to. Being here, this is you seeking support. This is you looking for support wherever it can come to you from. You're going to grab it and you're going to make sure that you benefit from it. So that, my friends, is everything I'm going to say about the fear of failure today. I'm going to move to the fear of judgment. And like I said, all fears, they interconnect somehow, because as I mentioned, one of the reasons or the causes for us to have a fear of failure is being afraid to be judged, right? So the main causes of us going through fear of judgment, number one is past experiences that we go through. If we've been in experiences where we've been criticized all the time, where we've been rejected, and we go also to the fear of rejection here, right? Where we've been humiliated, for example, in public, for us, like, for example, as children, I remember when I was a child, I remember my mom would never care if there were people around or not. She would scold me. She would say bad words to me. She would treat me so wrong. Whether there were people around or not, she wouldn't give a she wouldn't care, right? So there you go. And that developed for me. At one point in my life, I was afraid of being judged by others, because I went through that specific experiences, because it was not just one instance. These things don't show up in our life just because it happened to us once. It's an accumulation, and it's accumulation of so many experiences that we go through in our life, to the point that we become conditioned to be afraid of being judged, because we have been judged a lot when we were at those very specific situations. So those negative past experiences will cause us to become afraid of being judged. If we have low self-esteem, if we are always looking at ourselves and thinking, I'm not good enough, or, everyone else is better than me, because we're going to talk about comparison as well, we're going to be thinking that, you know, everyone's going to judge us because we have this low self-esteem, right? So that's one of the reasons why we are afraid of being judged. Another reason is, again, perfectionism, because we want everything to be perfect. And we think that if everything is not perfect, people are going to judge us. So we develop that fear of judgment. And if we are so self-conscious, so we have low self-esteem, but if we are also very self-conscious, like everything that I do is calculated, I have to be worried, I have to, how am I going to walk? How am I going to talk? You know, what sort of dress should I wear? That high level of self-consciousness will definitely trigger and make room for the fear of being judged to develop, you know, because then if I don't wear the right thing, people are going to say something. Or if I don't wear that, or if I say like now, I was about to say a bad word, which is fine. I mean, I can do whatever I want, you know, but there's this, should I or should I not? Are people going to judge me? That fear of judgment will kind of creep in and trigger my thoughts, right? So, and then something very important where we might develop the fear of judgment is actually society and the culture that we live in. The cultural and the societal factors are very important for everything in our life. So the minute the standards become so high and, you know, everything like today, if we look at social media, and if we, children, when they're looking at social media and they're looking at, you know, that now beauty is about, let's say, I don't know, women with their big mouth and their nose is so perfect and they all look like each other. So funny. But, you know, those societal standards, they put us in a place where we start being afraid that if we don't look like that, or if we don't go by the norms of society or by the norms of the culture that we live in, everyone is going to judge us. And of course, this means that we are susceptible to being afraid of being judged. Right? Now, how does this manifest in our life? So if I am afraid of being judged, what happens? What do? I start avoiding being in, you know, social places. So I start isolating myself. I start keeping myself in the corner. You know, it's better there. It's safer there. No one's going to say anything bad about me. No one's going to judge me. So I'm going to avoid everything, and I'm going to put myself in that corner. And guess what? When that happens, you are missing. You are missing on chances to learn. You are missing on opportunities to develop. You are missing on everything that you can put yourself in to develop yourself and to become the best version of who you already are. Okay? So that's one way where the fear of judgment will manifest itself, and it will make you do these things. Then you become also excessive in monitoring yourself. Like, what am I doing? Am I acting right? Am I moving right? You start really becoming your own judge. So you don't really wait for other people to judge you. You start judging yourself, right? That's one way of judgment manifesting, like fear of judgment manifesting in yourself. And then there are also physical symptoms, like things that happen to you when you are afraid of being judged. Like, for example, your heartbeats will go quite fast. You start sweating, you know. I remember when I started doing this, not this, before, when I started talking in public, I remember I used to sweat a lot. And only when I started working on my fears and when I started working on my limitations, did I realize that, oh, this is why I used to sweat. because I was afraid of what people will say about the work that I do, or about the words that I use, or about my delivery of anything that I'm talking, that I'm talking about. So, and it can also manifest in panic attacks, not just like normal physical symptoms. Panic attacks can also be caused by being afraid of being judged. And another way where judgment, fear of judgment, like if you do negative self-talk, if you talk to yourself in a negative way, be assured that you have the fear of judgment. And that's why you start talking to yourself in a negative way, like, I can't do this. I don't have the strength to do this. Or, no, this is not at my age. No, I can't do this. You know, you start telling yourself these negative things about you just so that you don't hear them from others. So when you start doing that, know that you are afraid of being judged. Now, how to get rid of it, you know? What I want you to do is I want you to always challenge your negative thoughts, always. Whenever a negative thought comes to you, challenge it. Ask it. Why are you here? What are you trying to teach me? No, it's not true. You are not, I do not recognize you. And recognize a better quality, recognize a better thought, or replace it with a positive thought about yourself, whatever that thought is, whatever that negative thought is. Challenge it and replace it with something positive. Sometimes it takes only this to make a huge difference for yourself in your life. And sometimes it takes more work, but sometimes it can start with something this simple. And believe me, that simple change can make a huge difference for you in your life, and it can take you to places. But you want to start somewhere, right? Another way of getting over that fear of judgment is starting to expose yourself outwards, but gradually. Don't just go and do it, especially if you know you have that fear of judgment. So do that gradually. And then practice self-confidence. You know, I always say this to everyone. We are divine creatures. We are born on this planet with everything, like with all the virtues that we can possibly think of. The only thing is that when we are born, we are not able to talk, we are not able to express ourselves. And then as children, we have this capacity to learn and be a sponge and just grab everything that comes to us from outside. So whenever we are grabbing all of this information, the information that we came with starts being in, like, it becomes the bottom layer, and everything else is on top of it. So reaching that bottom layer now becomes very difficult after so many years, after so much conditioning, right? So what happens is we kind of forget that we are confident, that we are beautiful, that we are grateful, that we are amazing creatures, that we are a copy of the source, that we are, like, you know, we are divine creatures. So we tend to forget that, right? And we want to remember that. We want to practice self-confidence because we have self-confidence. We just want to practice it. We want to remember that we have it. We want to also be compassionate. Always, like, compassion is one of the major things that will help us throughout life in everything, not just in conquering our fears or, you know, getting over our fears. Compassion is one of the major, like, compassion and gratitude, for me, they are the most important virtues that one can possess. Being grateful and being compassionate. So always remember to be compassionate. It's okay for you to fail. It's okay. What if people judge me? I don't care. Let them judge me. I know who I am. I know better. I don't care if they judge me. So be compassionate with yourself to start with, and love yourself. Love yourself, this first and foremost. And I will always say it. And I say it because I have been there. I used to not love myself. And I learned how to love myself. And believe me, that changed, that made such a huge difference in my life when I learned to love myself. And when you love yourself, by the way, everyone around you, they will love you, they will respect you, they will look at you in a completely different way. Start doing that. Start taking care of yourself and loving yourself. Another thing is always use that mindfulness. Be aware. Remember, when we are aware, 50% of the problem is done, right? And seeking support, again, from family members, from friends, from professionals if we have to. When we seek support and there's no harm, and don't judge yourself if you want to seek support. So the fact that you are seeking support, you are already crossing that threshold, right? So you know you're not judging yourself anymore. And when I say be compassionate with yourself, is definitely the way to do it is not to judge yourself to start with. Everything starts with you. Everything starts with you. And everything that happens in your life, it happens for you and it happens because of you. You are making it. Nothing is making it happen. You are making it. You are making that decision. And that's why at the beginning of the webinar, I said, it's true that we are faced with circumstances in our lives, but what we do or how we react to those circumstances is not imposed on us by the circumstance. It's actually our decision. And we take that decision very consciously or subconsciously most of the time. Okay. And that's why we are doing all of this. And what we want to do also is elevate our social skills. Do kind of role playing to elevate your social skills. Change the story. Change the story. Now, because I'm conscious of time and I still want to talk about the fear of rejection. Fear of rejection and fear of judgment are very close as well. So both of them, they're caused by mainly past experiences when we were rejected. When I talked about my experience with my mom and how I was humiliated, that's kind of a rejection, right? So fear of rejection, past experiences can cause fear of rejection. Low self-esteem, the same thing with fear of being judged, right? So if we have low self-esteem, we will also put ourselves in a place thinking that everyone's going to reject us. If we don't love ourselves, no one's going to love us. This is the thinking. And it's actually true. It's actually true. What you think of you reflects, or actually what you think of others reflects what you think of you. That's why people who judge, they are so afraid of being judged. And that's why they judge. So if you want to be unrejected, love yourself. Simple. And I'm going to give you also the combination of the why, the how, and what to do. And when we do a lot of comparison between us and everything around us, this is when we start being afraid of being rejected. I'm not that good looking, or I'm not that famous, or I'm not that rich. She is richer than me, or she is better looking than me, or she has a better car, or she has a better body. Her figure is so much nicer than mine. The minute I start doing this comparison, this is one of the causes that will create that fear of rejection for me, right? when I talk about past experiences, also in fear of rejection, is going through experience. Especially this happens, especially when we are talking about relationships, when we are talking about work, when we are talking about friendships, not just romantic relationships. So those past experiences, they make us develop a fear of being rejected, because at one point in time we were rejected by those people, right, in our lives. We are afraid to be vulnerable. And when we are afraid to be vulnerable, we are afraid to being rejected, because we feel like if we are vulnerable, people will see that we are weak and they will reject us. So that fear of vulnerability develops a fear of rejection, right? And weakness is a major part of any person. Our weaknesses are what create our strength. Think about it. Let me know what you think about this statement. Our weaknesses are a major factor in creating our strength. If I know my weaknesses, I will be able to develop them and grow, not develop them. Well, you won't be able to develop a weakness. You will make it better. You will create a strength from knowing your weakness. Do you agree with that? Let me know in the chat if you agree with that. And if you are watching the replay, message me, tell me, yeah, I agree. It's true. When I know my weakness, I can become stronger and I can create a strength from knowing my weakness. And also when we are attached to things, when we are always, like when we want attachment or when we seek attachment, we will always be afraid of being rejected, because we are always looking for that attachment. So the more we look for that attachment, the possibility of us developing a fear of being rejected becomes higher. Now, how does fear of rejection manifest itself in our life? So what we start doing, similar to the fear of judgment, we start avoiding being in like social interactions. We start becoming more isolated. We put ourselves on the side, right? And we start thinking like, it's better for me not to be there because they're probably not gonna take me on board. They will reject me. So we start isolating ourselves. And if you are someone who is always looking for validation, know that you have the fear of being rejected. Looking for validation all the time means that maybe they're not going to accept me the way that I am. So I need them to validate me. And that is one manifestation of the fear of rejection. Another one is we become very, very sensitive to criticism. So we take criticism to heart, like it's like if somebody criticizes us a lot and we are afraid and we take criticism, like we become very, very sensitive, that means that we are afraid of being rejected. Okay, so these are the kind of the symptoms or the manifestation of how being rejected, how fear of rejection manifests itself in our lives. And we tend to become people pleasers. We tend to become that person who's always wanting everyone else to be happy. We want everyone to be pleased with us because we are afraid that if we don't please them, they will reject us. So I'm going to please everybody. I used to be that person. I used to be that people pleaser because I was afraid of being rejected because of all my past experiences. So you see how this works? So it's kind of like a vicious circle, but we have the capacity as human beings to dissolve this vicious circle and make our life how do you call it? A proper path, instead of us turning and turning and turning and turning and never realizing anything or never getting anywhere, right? So, and then also when we do negative self-talk, the same way we do when we are afraid of being judged, we do that negative self-talk. We do it as well if we are afraid of being rejected. Now, for any of those fears, I always say, challenge your thoughts. Challenge what you are thinking. And recognize your thoughts and ask them, talk to your thoughts. Talk to your thoughts. Ask them, okay, what are you trying to tell me here? What are you trying to teach me? And no, I challenge you. That person is not going to reject me, or that person is thinks highly of me. You know, I don't like to use negation. So I would say that person thinks highly of me, or I am really good enough for this. I'm more than good enough for this. I'm the best person out there to be in that position, to be in that job, for example, you know, if we are going for a job interview. So always challenge your irrational thinking and come up with that positive counter thought. Yeah. Self-compassion, self-love, positive self-talk, basically. Talk to yourself in a positive way, always. Talk to yourself in, you know, affirmations. Affirmations are very, very powerful. Like alone, probably they don't fix much, but when you combine them with the work that you are doing for yourself, affirmations are amazing. You know, I'm conscious of time, but I'm still talking and the messages are coming, so I'm not going to stop. I will, but please stick with me to the end because I have the invitation for you. Now, because when we are afraid of being rejected, we isolate ourselves, we want to start to gradually become, you know, and more expose ourselves a little bit more, but do it gradually. Don't go just like, you know, like 180 degrees change. Just do it gradually so that you don't overwhelm yourself, especially because you are coming from a place where you actually have that fear. Okay. And then you want to develop resilience. You want to be resilient. You want to be that person who, you know, you can say whatever you want to say about me. I don't care. I know who I am. I know what I'm made of. I love myself. You know, and when you do that, that resilience that you have within you, it will manifest itself. And that resilience will it will create a shield, kind of. People will not be able to hurt you or harm you because you are already that resilient person. You have already developed, you've already created that unseen shield that really whatever they say will reflect back. You won't even hear it, you know, when you develop that resilience. And this is very important. I mean, for me, it was one of the major things that I've changed in my life. I developed that resilience. And really, those who know me will know and can tell you that, yes, we can say anything like downwarding, or we can say anything that can put Maysoon down from now until forever, and she would not budge. She would not care, because I have developed that resilience, and because really I don't care, you know. And this is where you want to be as well, so that you are not afraid of being rejected. That fear would not even exist for you, you know, when you are in this place, when you have resilience. And again, seek support. And there's no harm in doing that. And because I just mentioned that, I want to mention one more thing. Always, always, in any kind of fear, especially in the fear of rejection, you want to be assertive. You want to express yourself in an assertive way. You want to be expressing to your needs. You want to express your boundaries. You want to make sure that people around you hear you. And for them to hear you, you want to have assertiveness when you are talking, when you are saying things. So there is no way they will not listen. So practice assertiveness, okay? And to finish that, again, seek support. So for all three of them, for anything that you go through in your life, especially when you are on a self-development journey, right? The minute you start your self-development journey, you will notice that there are so many things that you know, but there are so many things that can be overwhelming because you don't know much about them. So when you seek support, whether you're seeking support from your family members, or you're seeking support from your friends, or you're seeking support from experts, right? You are putting yourself in a place where you are learning and where you are giving yourself the tools to really develop in the right way for you, the way that works for you. So seeking support works on all levels. For all fears, it works, and not only those three that I've talked about today. And with that, I come to my invitation for you. So if you are that person, like you've answered some of the questions I was asking, and you said, yes, definitely. And yes, I resonate with this. And yes, exactly. I hear you. I know what you're saying. So if you are that person, and if everything that I said, or a little bit of what I said today, resonated with you, and if you feel that you are now in that place where you want to work on yourself, where you want to develop yourself, where you want to get over those fears if you have them, let me know. And I would love to get on a call with you. I would love to talk to you. I would love to understand where you are in your life right now. I would love to see what's the situation looking like. And I would love to know where you want to go, what your desires are. And it's beautiful that sometimes I find it amazing, because I've been there as well myself, that a lot of the times when we are asked about our desires, we freeze, because we usually don't stop and ask ourselves, what do I desire? Where do I want to go? So I would love to get on that call with you and figure out together with you what your aspirations are, what your desires are, where do you want to go? And I will give you a lot of tips to help you, even now, even on that call, to help you move forward, even with those very little tips. And sometimes the smallest tip can make the biggest difference, And at the end of our call, if I find that I am that person who can actually help you and who can hold your hand through that process, I will tell you what it looks like to work with me. So all you need to do is book that call. And what I'm going to do is, under this, in the replay for this, I will share with you the link so that we can start to talk together, and we can, see, or I can assess where you are in your life, and we can get on that call. So all you need to do is click on that link, ask for the call, and let's get together on that call. And then we take it from there. And with that, I want to wish you a great rest of your day, evening, night, and I will see you again next week. Ciao, ciao.